So here we are, folks. This is the long-awaited Kylen and Crystal Schulte case, Part 3, with the update directly on Moab, Utah. That's been promised. Now, there are some things that are going to be revealed in the video that are hard evidence and so on that may cause a bit of a controversy and a stir out there. And that's fine if it does, but they reveal some key issues that do need to be very, very closely examined. And they show, of course, there's documents that basically show two of the Jones brothers, or Jones and his associates, in other words, visiting Lake Monroe, Florida, where a member of the Bertolino family lives. And that's correct. This is the exact same Bertolino we're talking about. That is the family of Stephen Bertolino. And so it's going to cause a bit of a stir, but again, it's just as important as every single other piece of evidence in this case. So we want to make sure to get that out there. And I have heard about a report that's been released from Moab. It's about 96 pages on Officer Pratt. And I've looked at some of it, but really not that much. There are allegations in there apparently of human trafficking, and I'm not going to comment on the substance of the human trafficking allegations right at this time. I do notice that there are some very, very likely causal links between this trafficking and the Crag. So at a minimum there, I do believe that needs to be further looked into. But based upon that report that's come out, I will say that that is extremely interesting because it lines up with what Detective Jensen has said before about there being a minimum of 2 separate guns that were used. Another part of this report at least alleges that some of the guns were stolen from Cortez. That's right, the town of Cortez, Colorado. And I'll be speaking about that just a bit to cover some of the substance on this, for sure. And also, of course, there's a lot of allegations out in the press right now about Brian Laundrie, whether he did or did not do anything to Gabby. I've seen the coroner's report, and apparently it did find his handprint or some kind of substance related to that on her, but I'm not convinced 100% on those things, folks. So I'm not going to comment on key issues relating to that situation with Laundrie, but I do believe it could certainly go either way because of the fact that none of the proceedings in Moab have yet to actually be made public. That's the most important thing we need to keep in mind about anything that's going on here. I spoke to one of my assembly people recently, and they basically reiterated to me, if we're going to go ahead and get this situation entirely rectified and corrected, you may end up being on the stand. You may end up having to take the stand a couple of times. And I indicated that, yeah, whatever is required, we will go ahead and make sure. And I will certainly make sure to do it. But this situation is just developing, and so there's no confirmation yet whether the human trafficking allegations are 100% true, but I just want to make you aware that those reports that have been done on Moab have come out, and they have raised the issue of human trafficking possibly connected with the Crag. And so we're going to look into some of this with more substance, and we're going to look also at these associates. Her name was Travel by Chris, and she was apparently either a friend or a direct associate of some kind of Jones. And so we're going to look at that, and that will also likewise be examined. So look forward to this. This is going to be a little bit long, but not any longer than about 28 minutes or so. So thank you again. Here we go. Let's get into this. Okay, so this is vital to document for a moment here. We're going to spend some time on this for just a minute. I've not really had time to truly review the report, but I've taken some of the key cutaways from it. There are many what-ifs that have presented itself as part of this investigation. The primary one being, would Gabby Petito be alive today if the case was handled differently? Ratcliffe has asked. That is impossible to answer, despite it being the answer that many people would like to know right now. Nobody knows. My job is to provide information into the details of the investigation and if it was handled appropriately. A nearly 100-page report was released Wednesday detailing the Moab City Police Department's handling of a domestic dispute between Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito in Utah that were weeks prior to her remains being found in Wyoming. After a formal complaint was filed with the Moab City Police Department, an independent law enforcement agency has completed a thorough review of August 12th domestic violence incident involving Gabby and Brian Laundrie. According to the report, the officers who responded to the incident made several unintentional mistakes due to the fact that officers failed to cite Miss Petito for domestic disputes and domestic violence. Now that's interesting, folks, but there's definitely a lot more to the story than that. Officer Pratt arrives on scene at the Moonflower Community Co-op where the incident took place and asks dispatch for the reporting party's phone number. Officer Eric Pratt also tells dispatch he spoke to another witness who gave more details on the vehicle. Based on Officer Eric Pratt's report, the witness Officer Pratt is referring to again, and so of course they want to blank that out. But this is interesting, folks, because as will be revealed also in the fourth video, Gail Jones also visited this Moonflower Community Co-op quite often. And that's correct. And this is the part that we wanted to zero in on for a moment. Officer Robbins stops the vehicle at the turnoff that goes into Arches National Park after he observed the van cross after it crosses over the yellow line. Well, here's the issue that I've seen all the way along with this, folks. They didn't tell the truth at all about what actually was going on in Moab. That's correct. Specifically, Officer Eric Pratt and Officer Mike is what I'll say his name is, because there are other ongoing proceedings and different things that I'm not going to comment on right at this time. But I'll just call him Mike. They both knew, okay, that Brian Laundrie was there, apparently in the area, playing pool with some of the people near the co-op. But more than that, they knew that Gail Jones had visited the co-op on frequent visits and refused to disclose this fact to anyone there in the area, which I find very interesting. We'll get to that later. The other point that I want to make everyone aware of is Officer Eric Pratt and Mike, is what I'll say his name is, because I'm not going to say anything else, did not actually notify anyone of the fact that Clark Jones, that's correct, which has been frequently mentioned in these videos, visited this exact area and played pool regularly. Brian was just a tourist passing through, but Clark Jones, who is a supervisor, okay, folks, don't forget this key point. He is a fleet director and supervisor for UPS Global Shipping, okay, in both New York and Utah. Well, it turns out he had visited this area and actually played pool near the co-op quite often. And Gail Jones had been seen visiting that co-op quite often. These facts, though, were never reported by Officer Eric Pratt, which I found very interesting. Neither were they ever mentioned by his senior officer on scene, or Mike, or others who were involved in this investigation, which I find very interesting, is what I'll say and leave it at that. Police scanner evidence, that means evidence from the actual police scanner, seems to document that Officer Eric Pratt knew a little bit more about this situation than anyone would like to believe. And one of those key facts that he knew is that there were bullet casings on the ground. That's what I'm going to say. Bullet casings that were confirmed on the ground to belong to a rifle actual rifle rounds. And this is confirmed in earlier reports. However, no one mentioned it. Not in the Moab police, not in any of the departments. For some reason, they left anything about any kind of bullet casings found on the ground out. However, Detective Jensen, who I commend for starting to really come on board with what's going on, he mentioned it in his first report that bullet casings were specifically found on the ground in Moab around the same time that Jones would come for some of these visits and probably right up until the actual time of August. They were found there multiple times in multiple different instances. They have not done all the full forensics to confirm exactly who the gun belonged to. But like I said, those guns that were stolen from Cortez, Colorado, very likely may belong to Jones because he had been seen also coming into the area in Moab. And make no mistake, folks, Clark Jones actually visited Moab, but he also visited St. George as a fleet supervisor for UPS. And believe it or not, Officer Eric Pratt declined to make mention of any of these things. Police scanner evidence verifies and shows they had seen bullet casings on the ground. I listened to some of those initial police scanners also myself. So there are many questions that surround the actual report. But from what I've seen, it is a mea culpa from the Moab Department of Police, after immense pressure, to admit that they knew there was a lot of troubling things happening in Moab before the actual incident ever ended up occurring with the Schultes and with anyone else who was visiting Moab at the time. You know, they knew about Brian Laundrie playing pool. That's interesting, for sure. More importantly, they knew about bullet casings, apparently at least several. And they had heard about Clark Jones going in there, not once, but regularly into the Moab area and also similar places, because he was spotted and seen in St. George. And when it talks about the Arches National Park, that's actually right there, folks, directly by, believe it or not, the Devil Arches. That's the Arches National Park of Moab. Well, guess whose vehicle was physically spotted at the Arches National Park, where Officer Eric Pratt claims that he followed that vehicle and he saw really nothing going on. That's correct. The vehicle of Clark Jones was literally physically spotted in the area of the Arches National Park. That's correct. And you could not make any of this up either. It was spotted there not too long before everything ends up occurring as well. Thank you.
Once again, I am repeating and redoing kind of an earlier video. This is very important to document for some reason. This is none other than Barbara A. Bertelsten. Barbara A. Bertolino, also directly known as, that's correct, Barbara A. Bertolino. Now, Barbara Bertolino, meaning Barbara A. Bertolino, has an interesting set of neighbors, including Mattie M. Stevens, and you'll notice Maria E. Jones. So she's directly involved with the Jones family for a very long time. Very long time. It's important to document this. So what we see here again is Lake Monroe, Florida. That's the address that she's had for quite a while. And she allegedly still has a business that's registered here in Lake Monroe, Florida. Now, some members of the FBI and whatnot have this information, but this is very important to document these facts. We're going to show this and broadcast this out to get more authorities, involved. But again, right here is none other than Earl Clark Jones. That's correct. Earl Clark Jones, who, just like Tina Clark Jones, frequently has visited the Monroe Harbor Marina, Disney Springs in Florida, the Myrtle Beach Boardwalk, and none other than Lake Monroe, Florida. That's correct. Lake Monroe, Florida. The same place where Barbara Ann Bertolino has lived for quite a few years. And you may say at this point that Barbara Bertolino is essentially the aunt of Marc Bertolino and also Stephen Bertolino. And she's lived there for a long time in the past. It's not known if she's alive at this point, but there is one of her closest kin living there. So what this does is it proves that Earl Clark Jones can certainly be considered a suspect at this point, and we can confirm that Earl Clark Jones, as well as Tina Clark Jones, were at Lake Monroe, Florida. They visited it, several times, and they have some very important questions that, at the minimum, now need to be answered regarding the deaths of Crystal, Kylen Schulte, and also very likely Christine Schulte as well. There's a weapon that's been found at the scene near there that needs to have ballistics officially done on it. It likely does not belong to who people are thinking, Brian, in this case. It most certainly does belong to one of the Jones brothers, because we have to remember there's also Earl Clark Jones, Robert John Jones, Tina Clark Jones, and they have a cousin on top of that who lives right there in South Carolina. So once again, just a quiet and short update on this key issue. Jones most certainly has to be looked into now, and we officially need to start asking some very key questions. Thank you.
This is it, folks. This is something very important here. I wanted to find out about what the truth was regarding the Moonflower Co-op. This is going to need to be exposed, okay, in video for sure. Because now there are finally proceedings which are starting to delve into this. But Gail Jones, okay, had visited this Moonflower Co-op area a lot, and what I will say is that there's physical evidence, meaning photographs, tangible evidence, meaning reviews, photographs, and much more that verifies and confirms Gail Jones had been to this Moonflower Co-op quite often. We're talking, all the time. And she may claim at some point, I don't know, the investigations are just barely really starting, so she may claim at some point, no, I was just a tourist. I've never heard of Clark Jones. However, if you go into the Crag, you will find Gail Jones as an official member of the Crag, the same exact one who's visited the Moonflower Co-op, that's correct, numerous times. Very important to document this for some reason. Exact same Gail Jones. And apparently the exact same Katie Jones. Now, I'm not 100% clear on what Officer Eric Pratt knew. I've never even delved into that report because I didn't have the time. But certainly there are some concerning things regarding this, because the Crag is a very well-known rock climbing network in Moab at minimum and in other areas. And I find it nearly impossible to believe that Mr. Eric Pratt would not have known anything about the Crag, especially considering Clark Jones' vehicle was actually spotted going into that vicinity, right at the Arches Park that he frequently went to, that Mr. Pratt frequently went to. And so there's some very concerning things there at minimum, where I feel like there just needs to be a transparent investigation of everything that has been going on in that town. is the bottom line. And like a lot of you have brought up before, it is a concern to me that Officer Eric Pratt never mentioned that the Crag climbing network frequently visits in Moab, and also they have actual climbers there from the area, such as Robert Jones. Additionally, that was a major concern and red flag is I heard on a live broadcast someone talking about the fact that Officer Eric Pratt apparently also knew that it was very dangerous to allow laundry to just keep on going into Moab, and that the similar allegations regarding possible human traffic or human smuggling, that were occurring in Moab at the time were of grave, grave concern. And he did not report anything about it, nor did he say anything about the allegations regarding what occurred at the Moab co-op before Kylen Schulte ever started working there. There were allegations apparently about that co-op before that time had ever arrived. And so he knew, I'm not going to speculate on all the things that he knew, but he knew at minimum about those key issues, is what I will say. And that's a grave concern. I believe that there has to be a transparent investigation, and that Detective Jensen will be correct in calling for a fully transparent investigation of certain activities in the town, is the bottom line. And that he knew apparently about guns being stolen. So that's what I'll say. Thank you again.
For some reason, we're going to document this for a minute here. This is a set of documentary specialists called Travel by Chris. This is an indirect associate, I came to find out, of this woman by the name of Tina Clark Jones. Now, Tina Clark Jones is directly related to this man who's been mentioned before on the internet, Earl Clark Jones. Earl Clark Jones, who's actually from Maryland, has visited Moab, Utah before. And so this is going to be one of the documentary videos on the Kylen and Crystal Schulte case. Since they are, these Jones brothers, is also Robert John Jones, they are directly connected to the murder of Kylen and Crystal Schulte. And unfortunately, it is looking very probable they killed her. So again, we're going to watch this, very important for some reason, on this is kind of an indirect associate of none other than Tina Clark Jones. Now, Earl Clark Jones and perhaps Tina Clark also know directly Bertolino, and it's believed that it may in fact be Marc Bertolino who they know. But there's things that are still being very closely investigated regarding this whole separate case. It is seeming more and more likely at present that the laundry person and somebody else were made to appear as though they finished off Kylen and Crystal and also one other person, but it was actually these people who are directly tied to Bertolino again. And again, we're going to have to talk about that in a whole separate video. For some reason, this has got to be documented. This is what's called Travel by Chris. They are indirect associates of the woman Tina Clark Jones. And then, of course, there's Earl Clark Jones. They had a lot to do with what went on in Moab because, once again, one of them, basically their direct brother-in-law, Robert John Jones, happened to work at the Moab Country and Golf Club. Yeah, you can't make that up. That's correct. The Moab Country and Golf Club, that's 5 minutes from Woody's Tavern. So here we go. Traveled by Chris. They are associates of a woman named Tina Clark Jones, who's related by blood to Earl Clark Jones. They don't know them well, but these are the people they're doing this little documentary called Travel by Chris, and they frequently go up to Moab. It's important to document it, show exactly kind of what locations they visit and things like that. For whatever reason, we're documenting it, everything to do with this. So they do attend some bars around the area. Apparently they attend Woody's Tavern also. But that could mean nothing. Other than the people who are behind the documentary do know the woman known as Tina Clark Jones. They know her for living in the area right there around Moab. And then they've at least heard of Earl Clark Jones. So this is important. We're going to go ahead and watch the whole documentary they do. For some reason, they frequently travel to Moab, Utah. The time that they had traveled in this case was in 2018. This is a long time ago. This is before the murders were even in the news, before there was at least 3 murders in Moab. These people traveled there along the same exact path, and I'm going to show you in a later video. You're going to see Tina Clark Jones personally traveling that route, big time. Tina Clark Jones not only traveled this exact route, she retraced the steps of the route after the fact. There's something very, very wrong that's been going on with that for a while, because she's the direct sister, not even sister-in-law, it appears the direct sister of Earl Clark Jones. So remember that name, Earl Clark Jones. Thank you.
Yes, I will be speaking with Detective Jensen's office. We have been missing each other, and similar. But after I'm done really speaking with Kaysville and getting connected with what is truly happening, I'll be speaking to that office again. Thank you. So that right there, folks, officially has been the Kylen and Crystal Schulte case, Part 3, the long-awaited update. Now, some are making some pretty serious allegations, saying there's a lot of human smuggling groups and things going on. Again, folks, I don't know, okay? I don't think any of us have a completely clear picture on what it is, all right? But I do know that one judge who's looked at it, at least briefly, believes there's a lot of significant problems with the Crag. My bottom line here, folks, is I'm just astonished that no one had seriously looked into the Crag itself. Okay, for all the hard evidence and things that are linking the Crag to different things, I'm astonished that no one from Moab, specifically the Moab Police Department and so on, had not even done a kind of an investigation of the Crag. And so, I'm desiring, no matter what, to see a transparent investigation done, this whole ordeal. I don't know if there's human smuggling or not. I'll have to check with Kaysville. They're the ones who can actually link directly key evidence and things concerning such allegations. But I can tell you that the most concerning thing of all is that nobody had looked extensively into what the hunters and so on, and different people associated with the Crag were doing, why they were there, why they had consistently been found and proven to be in Moab repeatedly. We're talking more than 5 separate occasions this happened. And so what I desire to do is just get to the truth. And I will speak to Kaysville, and I will have, a live kind of podcast going, to start really digging into this, to get to the actual full truth. You know, I don't believe Officer Pratt has been truthful. No. After speaking to my assemblyman and them making some interesting connections between possible network in Salt Lake or so forth and the Crag, you know, I don't believe he's been totally truthful. But the bottom line is, I'm not going to say anything to jeopardize that or speak against him in some kind of way, because I want to see a transparent investigation now finally occur related to this whole situation. And that includes anything that is connected with the Crag. So thank you again. The only way we can get this done, folks, all right, is together. So make sure you like, spread the knowledge, spread the videos, get it out there as far and wide as you can, because that's the only thing that counts at this stage. And for the Schultes especially, you know, God be with you. Thank you.